Good evening to you, and many thanks for staying with KTN News, and welcome to this edition of Choice 2017. Of course, sitting in for my colleague Ben Kitili, and tonight we shall be giving a special focus on that special sitting that has been convened tomorrow by the National Assembly, just to speak about some of those proposed amendments to the election reforms bill. And of course, joining me later in this discussion is Raphael Tuju, who is the head of the Jubilee Party Secretariat. We also have in studio Chris Wamalwa, who is the MP for Kiminini. So welcome, and let's begin this discussion by taking a look at some of the sound bites we've seen in the week regarding this issue.
Tumeona njama inapangwa na Jubilee kuiba kura.
Has a generator backup in the event power goes off. In our own homes, we have got candles preparing ourselves in the event power goes off.
All right, so let's just get straight into it. And good evening, gentlemen. Many thanks for joining us on this edition. Good evening to you. Let's just start by talking about that special meeting that has been called, the sitting that has been called tomorrow. And just your feelings on it. We were talking just before we got on here. How important is it that, we have?
First and foremost, as it's provided for in the outstanding orders, special sittings are sittings that you are recalled. Because right now we are in recess, we are not in session. And the leader of majority or the leader of minority under outstanding orders can write to the speaker to request for this special sitting, maybe to deal with a matter which is of urgent in nature. And looking at the standing orders and also looking at today's, I saw the order paper on the website of Parliament, I don't see anything there that maybe requires that urgency, because we have issues to do with discussing some reports from Kilifi of some purported cement plant. We also have on the order paper to discuss some of the bills that have just come from the Senate, which was passed about 2-3 weeks ago.
Right. And
yet on the floor of the House, in the National Assembly, we have about more than 20 pieces of legislation that have come from the Senate. Then we also have a report from the Committee of Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, and that is where the in thing is. But when you look at the way the order paper is appearing, you find that it's coming much later. So maybe these other businesses on the order paper were just by the way.
But
the critical thing...
One would argue that we're heading into the 2017 general election, and we are far behind in our timelines. And these are legislations that, need to be in place as we go.
First and foremost, I need to explain to you that in Parliament we had the elections laws. This is a law that was passed by Parliament, and it was assented. And this was the negotiated elections law.
Right.
In fact, when it came to the Committee of the whole House, no amendments were done. These laws came in because there were demonstrations, people lost lives, lost property, ABCD. But unfortunately, there was another law, which is same elections law, which had been proposed by the committee, the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, the Chipkonga Committee.
Right.
And because this law had been passed and had been assented by the President, some of us from the coalition side, called coalition, we thought there was no point for us to have these laws. Now that the negotiated one passed, this one should die natural death. Unfortunately, that never happened. And what we're going to discuss tomorrow, why we are reading a lot of mischief, is this elections law, which had been proposed by the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, which is supposed to have died. And we're looking at the spirits and the perspective of that negotiated law, and looking at the proposed amendments is actually contrary. And that's why from the coalition, we are reading some mischief pertaining this other law that is coming to the floor of the House, which is not supposed to have been there, because everything had been taken care of.
All right. And
in
we'll
the previous law that was been assented.
Of these amendments. And just your feeling on the same, that Honorable Wamalwa feels there's no urgency in convening this special meeting. Do you feel the same?
Well, Honorable Wamalwa is not he's in court, but he's not in ODM.
Right.
But ODM has got a court case, which they filed, to challenge the IEBC for the deadline that they had put on 8th of December, that any candidate for next year's elections should submit some financial reporting requirements. They felt this was unfair, and they went to court. The matter has not been adjudicated in court yet, but they found something wrong with that law.
Right.
So they went to court. Ordinary laws should be made in Parliament. So I don't know, do they want to resolve this in court, or would they rather they resolved it in Parliament?
Right.
That's not the only case. There's another case in which the court is going to pronounce itself. Another litigant went to court to challenge the issue of identification with the BVR as the exclusive way of identification. There's nowhere in the world where that is done, except now Kenya is going to be the first one if this goes through. The court is supposed to pronounce itself on that one on the 29th of this month.
Right.
So I think you can't eat your cake and have it. You can't go to court challenging laws from Parliament and refuse to go to Parliament
To make these laws.
to make these laws.
So you want to have your cake and eat it
I
as
think
court?
maybe on the way forward we need to understand that I'm from Fort Kenya, yes, but we have a collective responsibility under
Right.
the Code Coalition.
Right.
And maybe Honorable Tuju has not had an opportunity to look at tomorrow's order paper. It has nothing to do with the election campaign financing. I think that's what he's referring to, where IBC went ahead and came up with the regulations. You know, regulations are there to operationalize the statutes. Right. And for any regulation to be effected, it has to be passed by Parliament. So the election campaign financing,
right.
those regulations where there was a requirement like last week where people are supposed to have formed some committees and open a bank accounts and submit to the IBC. To me, that one was a premature process because those particular regulations had not been debated by Parliament, and if Parliament has not passed that, it was very premature for IBC to come and require candidates to do that. And in any case, candidates, you can only become a candidate if you've gone through the nomination process. Right now, we don't have the candidates. The people that we have now are aspirants. Right. So really, candidates will come in towards May when parties will have gone through the primaries.
Right.
So for now, I think IBC, they should have gotten some maybe competent lawyer for purposes of helping them in terms of interpretation. Because the law talks of aspirants, of candidates. But here, we don't have candidates now. The people we have are aspirants.
Right.
At the same time, in line with the Elections Act, they are public servants who are required to resign. This is 6 months to elections, and from my calculation, it will come around February. So really, it is very premature, and it was very, very wrong for IBC to have come up with this. But the critical issue now, which you need to handle here, which I had our code leader, Raila Molo Tinga, talking about it, and this is something that we've had differences with the Jubilee, is about the issue of rigging. You know, we want this country to have credible elections.
Right.
Under Article 86 of the Constitution, the IBC is required to ensure that the elections are going to be free, fair, democratic, and to ensure that the procedures, the process of voting is supposed to be simple, accurate, transparent, and also ensure that all malpractices, election malpractices, are eliminated. Now, when we go back to the gist of the Elections Act, which was negotiated through the Orengo Kiraitu Committee, there was a provision that says the electronic aspect, the BVR, the biometric voter registration, it's supposed to identify you in terms of your facial features, in terms of fingerprints and ABCD, because as per the critical report, 1.2 million of the voters were found to people who died.
Right.
Secondly,
so you're poking holes
absolutely.
in the
Secondly, it also showed almost 300,000 voters were voting double. So the only way to eliminate these malpractices which IBC must ensure stipulated under Article 86 of the Constitution is to do, not really fresh, to have the BVRs, because they're the only ones which will be able to identify. In the absence of the BVRs, and by the way, after registration, before you go vote, there's something called EVDs, this electronic voter identification. They'll be able to identify, are you the right person? Looking at your features, looking at your fingerprints. That's the only way they're going to eliminate these malpractices of having the dead people to come back, resurrect, and come and vote and go back to their graves.
But the IBC has been calling, in fact, wants to conduct an audit of the voter register by using the audit firm KPMG, and we've seen the coalition, the opposition coalition, opposing this. And of course, all efforts, perhaps one would argue, to see that these systems are actually in place. And also, we'll talk about this. I want to bring Tuju into this discussion.
I think, Madam Moderator, you'll have to give me a chance to talk.
Yes.
He's talked about so many things. I think he's gone to 3 topics. And I can tell you that I cannot beat this man when it comes to the amount of talk. He's a practicing politician. Let's start with the issue of the deadlines with respect to the financial reporting, which kicks in automatically by law from 8th of December, because it's supposed to be there 8 months before the elections. That is the law. It is in our books. The IBC cannot change that law. They have no capacity to change that law. And that's why when it came to 8th of December, on 7th of December, as a party, 6th of December, we wrote to IBC and asked for clarification. They gave the clarification 24 hours before the deadline. We frantically did everything to comply. We did not agree with them. We wrote a protest letter to IBC that was unfair. 24 hours was too short for our candidates. The president himself just managed to comply. The position of Jubilee and the position of the president thereby was that let us comply first, and then we can complain. That is the way we can do it. Of course, CORD are at an advantage. When they see a law they don't like to obey, they can go to the streets and protest. But on the side of the government, we don't have that luxury. So he cannot say that the IBC were wrong to enforce a law which was made by Parliament. And that is why ODM itself has gone to Parliament to challenge IBC. But this is playing around with Kenyans. Don't challenge IBC, challenge the law.
And where to do that?
And where else can you do this except in Parliament? I think I need to interject. I think if we finish with that first, I think the next thing that you bring about is the question of BVR. Now, nowhere in the world do you have an identification during the voting process that is not backed up. And with all due respect, my younger brother, I have been an observer of elections in other countries. And the last one I went to was in Zambia. You use the BVR, but you must have a printout so that in the event that the BVR fails, then you have a printout with the picture, with the ID number, with the voter registration number that you can fall back to.
And I actually want him to respond to that, because one would argue that is a sensible argument.
It's reasonable.
So
unless you don't want to have an election, which is completely a different matter. If you don't want to have an election...
Yes, I'll allow you to interject.
Let me respond to Honorable Tuju. I have a lot of respect for Honorable Tuju. And I'm one member of Parliament who pays attention to the details when it comes to legislation. I want to challenge him to tell me which part of the law says that 8 months to you have to submit a campaign committee or the bank account. Let me tell you, when it comes to matters of the law,
I think it's...
Let me finish. We have the statutes, and you come up with regulations to operationalize the statutes, isn't it?
Right.
And the law we are talking about, it is Election Campaign Financing Act. So for you to operationalize that law, IBC is supposed to develop regulations. So these regulations, for them to be effected, they must be passed by Parliament. So Parliament never passed the regulations. So as far as we are concerned,
they're not in.
There's no way it's provided for, because that
there's
is
no
the regulation.
mechanism for enforcing
Absolutely.
this act.
So what IBC is supposed to have done, they are supposed to have brought these regulations to Parliament. There's a process of those instruments. So as an active parliamentarian, and you know I am, being on top of things, I've never seen at any given time that Parliament has discussed and passed those regulations. So this is something which I said is premature.
All right.
So
just to
as I finish that, I want to follow systematically. So when it comes to going to court, it's only the court that has unlimited jurisdiction. So you can't say you want to comply on illegality unless if there was a conspiracy between IBC and Jubilee, that let's bring this matter out.
Right.
You see, our argument is it was premature. Today, the Committee of Delegated Legislation, maybe Honorable Tuju might not be aware, they summoned the IBC. And the same CEO and the Secretariat came and they confirmed it was wrong.
Right.
So the issue of the process of those instruments, it was premature. Secondly, I've not finished. I want to handle his arguments systematically so that also the viewers can be able to understand. Now, court side is not saying we're against the issue of backup. The way the law has been amended and compared to the negotiated form, it is contrary to that spirit, because the negotiated laws, electoral laws, was you do a backup electronically.
Right.
But then they are talking of introducing something manual in the event. And that
one would argue that if it's supposed to be a backup to possibly, in the event that this electronic system errs, then you need something that's
Let me
not
explain our worries now.
Right.
That's where our concern is. In this country, when you look at the critical report, we've had issues, chaos, because of the issue of rigging. So these laws were there to ensure the loopholes of rigging have been sealed. So the moment you put that in the law, because it's already provided for, but it's electronically. But the government by now should have looked for a mechanism of maybe curing this issue of that event of maybe, I heard Duale saying that in the event there's no electricity. Why can't we plan early and have generators? This country, many times have been having
the early plan, the manual,
they are talking about the manual which is manipulated.
Yeah,
you can have dead people.
All right.
I think, let's be honest. I mean, I think there's need for intellectual honesty here. With all due respect to you, sir, there are going to be 54,000 polling stations. There are going to be 54,000 polling stations. Are you talking about 54,000 generators in all those remote areas? Let's be realistic. We're in Kenya. When you're talking about, you've actually conceded that there's need for a backup.
Absolutely. That one we have not refused.
Fine. And if it is electronic backup, I don't think there's a problem about that. You can debate that in Parliament. It can be electronic backup. Maybe you have another computer which has got the same things if you are allergic to paper. But there must be backup. I think let us accept that.
Perhaps.
And the law as it is at the moment,
right.
the law as it is at the moment, there's no room for backup. And that has got to be addressed. That is something which has got to be addressed. And I can tell you, if today, and I know something about equipment. I've been in television production, as you know.
Right.
You know, you need a very, very small thing to go wrong with the BVR machine, and then elections will stop. In fact, to you, my brother, with all due respect from the research which has come out and the knowledge which is available, if your own opponent knows that there's an area where you are strong and is not that strong or she's not that strong, all they have to do is to compromise that BVR in those areas. Then there'll be no elections in those areas. But maybe that's the good part for you. They can also decide to sabotage the BVRs in their own area. That would automatically lead to a disputed election. If that is the intention of CORD, that you want us to go straight into an election which is going to be disputed because a BVR was not working somewhere in Lamu or in Siaya or in Webuye, then that is a ground for going for a petition. If that is the intention, if that is the vision of CORD, then we have to call it out.
All right,
now,
so
let me
that
explain.
means a question that really has been raised. Is this a premeditated, are we premeditating a
No, let me explain
chaos?
this. We've had by-elections in this country. All these by-elections, surprisingly, we've been using these electronic gadgets. We've not had any opportunity. We've had it in the remote areas of Kajiado. We've had it in Malindi, everywhere. The IBC has been using these electronic gadgets.
Right.
Why is it at such a time you bring a law quickly, call people from recess, and you say, we want to have a provision that in case it fails. Failing can be by design. These are worries. Today, there was a court injunction today, the Dubai-based company, which was made to supply the BVRs,
Right.
and looking at the history of that company, it has been printing BVRs in many countries which have failed. So manipulation can also start from the same company, can even be able to supply BVRs which are defective. And that's why in CORD, and that's why even in that law, there was a provision that you must be able to test these kids.
Right.
90 days to elections. This is what is in the law. 90 days to elections, they must be tested. You must also do voter audit. And in the same law, it said, an international firm with experience in voter auditing. KPMG, it audits financial books.
Right.
It has no experience whatsoever when it comes to matters of voter auditing. That's why we are reading malice, we are reading a lot of maybe conspiracy that is likely to be there, unless Honorable Tuju convinces me. Because this was put in the law to tighten the loopholes that are there that are likely to bring in about voter rigging.
We'll take a final look at that, but let's just listen in to some of the statements that have been made by both President Uhuru Kenyatta and opposition leader Raila Odinga on the issue.
Uchaguzi utakuweko na mipangilio ya kufanya uchaguzi iko na inaendelea. Kwa hivyo tusibabaishwe na hiyo maneno.
Huwezi kuwa wewe unatafuta kiti, unapigania kiti na vile vile unataka kuwa supervisor ya IEBC. How is that going to happen? You cannot be a referee in your own game, my friend.
Excuse me. So let's just pick it up from that soundbite by Deputy President William Ruto. That are we, not doing our politics right, or this is just it? Like from what Deputy President is saying, that there has been criticism that the opposition is really, first of all, premeditating, and we've talked about that, other than articulating other issues. Is this something that I want to bring it?
If you allow me just to make a few statements. First of all, when there's a complaint about IEBC, the opposition addresses it to government. Government has no say in IEBC. That's why the president complied. That's why Jubilee Party complied, despite having such reservations, which we actually put in writing. The opposition side, they don't have to be responsible for anything. They can actually organize to have a demonstration in front of IEBC tomorrow. As government, I don't expect President Uhuru or the Deputy President, or that for that matter even myself, to go in front of IEBC carrying placards. But if you even do an audit of who are the staff of IEBC, the top man at IEBC comes from his village. So who is likely
Has that been really?
Who is likely to have an inside lane in this whole thing?
But also, to be fair, that has not been the central argument.
Well,
he doesn't come from my village. And one thing, read Article 86 of the Constitution. IBC has to put measures in place to eliminate any voting malpractices. When people demonstrate, I want to highlight this to Honorable Tuju, whom I respect so much. Under Article 37 of the Constitution, Kenyans have a right to picket and to demonstrate.
Precisely.
It's in your right. So you can't come and purport and say that code can be able to go and demonstrate. That one is a constitutional right. Even Honorable Tuju, with due respect, can be able to do that.
Right.
So we are actually working within the framework of the law. And in this case, what code is raising is also to help Jubilee. What we want to ensure we have transparent and accountable elections which are free and fair. And that's why we are against this issue.
All right.
Of bringing some loopholes. We don't want votes to be stuffed.
All right, let's talk about the loopholes that you speak about. And because this is supposed to be a backup, should there be a system failure with these systems? So in your
my own thinking, I want to give that was in other jurisdictions, like what happened in Ghana. Ghana, when they were doing the voting, there was a failure of systems, I think in 2 constituencies or so. Then what happened? They suspended the elections. Till after 3 weeks is when the elections were called, they voted, and they were announced. So what we are trying to put across is to seal the loopholes of rigging, which Jubilee is going for. And this country, as per the curricular report, we want to have free and fair and credible elections. And ICT plays a very, very critical role. Honorable Tuju is a guru in the side of ICT. But the backing we are talking about is provided for in the law, electronically.
Right.
That's why we are against that manual, the manual way of doing the identification of voters. We don't want a situation whereby people have voted and these people are dead.
Electronic backup would not be...
It will not, because, let me explain.
Right.
You know, we have electronic voter...
Yeah. Like,
can I finish,
just to paint
please?
A picture of what
electronic voter identification.
Right.
When you go register, when you go vote, you'll put they'll identify your fingerprints. It also identify your face. It will say, this is Honorable Chris Wamalwa.
Right.
If I have a scar here, it will be able to know.
That you can trace
absolutely. All the biometrics, the fingerprints,
right.
The face, it will show. If you have big cheeks or big ears, big nose, it will show. So it eliminates issues of rigging, whereby the 1.2 million, as per the curricular report, people who have died and they are found voting. This is what we are saying. We are against this. It's also for the good of Jubilee. So the moment we open this, we'll be opening a Pandora's box that the voters, and when it comes to voting, Jubilee wants to rig these elections.
All right, let's just stick with that point before we go on break and come back. Do you agree with that reasoning that an electronic backup would then be, be able to be traceable, because all these biometrics cannot be manually manipulated?
I think we're making progress, and I think probably is a matter of differences in terminology. If you put your fingers on the biometric, when you put it there, first of all, the manufacturer themselves say that there's a margin of error. And by the calculation of, considering the fact we've got 18 million people, by their own calculations, we can have false rejects or false acceptance up to 300,000.
Right.
That is by the manufacturer themselves. The last elections were determined by a margin of 8,000. So if there's an error of 300,000, then I don't know if that's a margin of error that we can accept. He's just talked about, there were 2 constituencies in Ghana where systems failed and they had to be repeated. In Ireland, one constituency can have 70,000 people, 80,000 people.
All right. All right.
In our last elections, the decision was made by a difference of 8,000. So is that a margin of error that we are ready for? Let me just finish. Let me finish.
We have to take a break.
Yeah, let me finish. Let me finish this one. Now, when it comes to false rejects, false, 2 constituencies not working, then that is Ghana. Ghana has not had the kind of post-election violence that this country has witnessed. Can this country bear a situation in which 2 constituencies are not counted and everything is hanging on the cliffhanger?
All right. All right. I'm going to ask you to hold that thought, and we'll also talk about comparison and benchmarking with best practices in other countries with regard to this, election systems and voting systems, rather. So right now we want to take a short break here on Choice 2017. Don't go too far. We'll delve deeper into this issue when we return.